Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just getting set up here. I will say, if you are joining us on Facebook, really glad to have you. If you want to take part in the trivia, which we are going to be doing here momentarily, you will want to hop over to Zoom and follow the link on our website under virtual events so you can take part, because we are going to conduct that via Zoom. But in the meantime, we're waiting for our colleague here to get off screen before we get started. But in that, I will introduce ourselves. So my name is Alicia Barrett. I'm the wine educator at Binny's, and I'm joined by...
I'm Jenna Linder. I am currently the wine manager at the Arlington Heights location. I've bounced around though. Shout out to the South Side, where I spent a lot of my time before Arlington. Hello, everyone.
So Jenna not only is one of my favorite wine managers of Binny's, but also very passionate about champagne. And we're thrilled to be here today because it is Champagne Day, folks. And though many of you kind of think this is for New Year's Eve, well, we are celebrating today, as is everyone around the world. And also, I hope that you take into this that champagne is not just a wine for celebration, but it is for every day as well, right?
Yes. I'm a big bubbles in the summer person.
Okay.
Because it's hot and champagne is cool and just bubbly and fritzy.
Yes.
Oh, I love it.
So refreshing.
Like all the time.
So we thought today that we would kind of walk you through the Champagne region. We're going to taste 4 fabulous champagnes. And then we're going to have our trivia, and it's your chance to win a Binny's gift card. We'll have the 3 top scores, all will win a Binny's gift card. So we'll email you afterwards. And as Jeff has done, please use the chat function or the Q&A function in Zoom to chime in with thoughts. If you're tasting along, what are you tasting? We'd love to hear that. And also just any questions that you have as we make our way through. So Jeff, thanks for joining us from Cleveland.
Yeah, shout out to Cleveland.
And yes, champagne certainly brightens up this Friday, no doubt. So I hope that everyone is drinking along here. So Jenna, what are we starting out with while I get this going?
We are starting out with Piper Heidsieck. Lovely bottle right here, which we have at Binny's on sale for $30, around $30.
Yeah, $32.99 right now, folks. Crazy deal on the Piper Heidsieck.
Incredible for any champagne, really, to be that affordable. So,
yeah, and we're going to go through today as we go through these slides and kind of introduce you to the region of Champagne and the wines. We'll get into kind of what makes champagne unique, and why is it a little bit higher in price points than other sparkling wines from around the world. So let's get started. Cheers to everyone.
Cheers.
Happy Champagne Day.
Happy Champagne Day, everyone.
So firstly, as many of you know, Champagne is an actual place. It is a region in France, and you can see it marked there on the map. We're 90 miles from Paris. Champagne is not just synonymous with all sparkling wine, and I'm sure, Jenna, in the stores,
Yes,
you probably get that a lot.
All the time. And if you've ever gone to a Binny's, I'm sure if you've asked where the champagne aisle is, or you've asked for a champagne around $15, you've probably gotten a wine consultant that may have explained this or asked, are you looking for true French champagne or sparkling wine in general? Because there is a reason we ask that. We're not trying to be snobby. It's because champagne is a place, and it's going to be very different from sparkling wines from other areas in the world.
Yes, exactly. And we have a few of the subregions here listed on the slide. And yeah, Champagne, the boundaries here were drawn, and it was established as an appellation, a protected designation of origin in France back in 1936. So this is nothing new. All right, and so we do really in the wine industry like to protect that because they have a lot of rules and regulations to preserve the quality that is coming out of that region. So continuing on here, just to give you an idea, so what is this region, kind of what is it made up of? What are some kind of numbers to put into your mind? And firstly, as you see, it's divided up. These crews are really divided up by villages. That's how it's classified. If you ever see Jenna in a store or one of our colleagues and they mention to you that a champagne is a Grand Cru or Premier Cru, they're citing that the fruit source of that champagne are from villages that were designated as Grand Cru villages. So all the vineyards within that one village would then achieve Grand Cru status, and thus they can put that on the label. Those tend to be the most prized sites. Champagne is a region made up of these really deep chalk soils, which helps regulate the water and helps with drainage, another unique attribute of the region. And so some of the best sites on slopes with good sun exposure, et cetera, are these kind of Grand Cru or Premier Cru villages. And then in the other icons you see here, we have growers, cooperatives, and houses. And the first wine that we have, the Piper, is a house, okay? So a house, you can grow your own fruit and make wine from it. You can also purchase fruit. You can purchase wine or must that's not even done fermenting. You can buy finished wine. All right, and it allows you to really scale your operations. And so a lot of the big champagne producers that you know are houses, okay? But we're also, we want to make sure that you know the other types of producers. And Jenna, a lot of people have come in lately and asked about grower champagne, and you probably have heard of that. So what exactly is that?
So how I always relate it to people, to my customers, is I compare grower champagne to if you're going to a farmer's market and you're getting the fruits and vegetables from a farmer's market that were grown locally, that were handpicked, there's more care, more than likely they were probably grown organically or with very little pesticides, etc., versus getting fruits and vegetables from a supermarket that were more grown mass produced, I guess you could say. So there's a little more attention to detail in a grower champagne.
Yeah, and just, overall, just as she mentioned, just the production size tends to be a little bit smaller because these are people that are farming and growing their own grapes and selling and marketing their own wine. And so land is expensive, right? So you can only kind of do so much, make so much wine when you have to own the land yourself there. Now, I will say all grapes in Champagne by law must be handpicked. So they will do that kind of across the board, a great attribute of the region. They want to make sure they're picking the best fruit and not picking too much of it either. They want to keep their yields nice and low. And then of course, cooperatives kind of know that from, of course, the food industry as well, but where growers will kind of pool their resources and might share all of their grapes together to go ahead and produce and market a wine. So lots of different things here to know. We're going to get into the grower champagne a little bit later because we have one to taste today. I do want to talk a little bit about history because Champagne was not always the kind of premier region of sparkling wine as we know it today. And in fact, it really wasn't until the 17th and even the 18th centuries that they were deliberately producing sparkling wine. They first actually started by making still wine. And you'll notice it was the Romans who first planted vineyards in the Champagne region back in the 3rd and 4th century. And because of the cathedral in Reims being so connected to the coronation of the French kings, it really became intertwined with both the church and kind of the monarchy, the royal class of Europe. But at the time, it was a lot of still wines. That's what they were making. And in fact, what they would do, they would make their still wines and they would think that fermentation was over and then bottle and kind of cap their wines. And because in the wintertime, the yeast went dormant. So they thought it was done. Well, in the springtime, when the yeast kind of woke back up in the bottle and fermentation continued, bubbles were produced. And so it was kind of by accident in a way. But then they realized what a special gift this was. The British really fell in love with it too. Also contributed some strong glass so they wouldn't explode. And so Champagne as we know it today and the region embracing sparkling wine would come at that time. So we know it, of course, but back in the 1700s, that's when some of the kind of these original houses that we know today were founded. So really rich history here. And we'll get to some questions here that are coming in. Firstly, hello to Natalie in DC. Thanks for coming on. And we have some people drinking GH Mom, excellent. And a little bit we got a question here on kind of why champagne is so bubbly. And we'll get to it as we kind of continue to taste. There are so many bubbles, of course, in a bottle of champagne. And that's coming because they, by law, require to do 2 fermentations, the second of which is in the very bottle you buy it in. So we're going to get into kind of the production here in a moment, and we'll explain that a little bit more, as Jeff has just popped in with. So, and yes, we can email out some of the slides for you, Deborah. Okay, so real quick, you know what? Let's actually talk Piper first. We want to taste, right? So let me stop our sharing here for a moment, and we're going to talk a little bit about Piper Heidsieck and this wine. So, firstly, this wine that we're drinking, a lot of champagne is a blend of grape varieties, not all the time, but this one is. And Piper Heidsieck right now on our shelf, again, $32.99. This is 50 to 55% Pinot Noir, 30 to 35% a grape called Meunier, and then we have 15 to 20% Chardonnay. So this is a non-vintage wine. And that means that they're allowed to and deliberately will blend wines that are made of different grape varieties, of different vineyards, and of different years. All right. And Jeff, we are drinking the Brut of Piper Heidsieck. So the Brut here of Piper Heidsieck is about 10 grams per liter for the dosage. All right. And but you know, don't be kind of turned off if you think 10. Oh, that seems like a high number. For the residual sugar, or for the sugar that's been added, but that bright acidity will always kind of balance that out, when you say.
Yeah, definitely.
So what do you think of this Piper, Jenna?
I love the Piper. I think a Piper is one that I recommend to people on a daily basis, especially when we were out of several sought after brands for quite a few weeks there. Piper became a favorite at our location. It's fresh, it's light. It's easygoing. It's not overly dry for people who maybe are just starting to get into champagne or are used to like California versions of sparkling wine, or even Prosecco, and they're looking for something a little fruitier. I wouldn't say this is super fruity by any means, but it's definitely going to ease you into that classic champagne style.
I totally agree. The fruit is really the star of the show here. It's kind of this nice bruised apples and pears, alongside some red fruit components, which, you know, you think kind of raspberry and kind of dark cherries that the Pinot Noir element is bringing. So Piper is kind of a great champagne for the holidays, especially when you are having everyone under the sun's coming over and they have different preferences. I think this is one that really everyone can get behind.
It's definitely a people pleaser, and you can't go wrong with the price either if you're buying in bulk. That's just hits all the boxes for me.
Yeah. And a very, very established house. Okay, so this is a house. They were founded back in the 1700s, the Heidsieck. So
yeah, 1785. Actually.
1785. There you go. So lots of history here. Piper Heidsieck, a nice kind of approachable, very kind of crowd-pleasing champagne, nice kind of dense fruit quality to it. And then again, that dosage at 10 grams per liter, they're doing this right before they close and go ahead and cork that wine at the very end of the second fermentation. They'll go ahead and add in a little sugar to balance out the wine, balance out all of that really high acid that we're getting because of this cool climate. And they intentionally pick early for that. So nice round textures is what I'm getting at there. So let's take a look at, I kind of listed off the grape varieties quickly here in the Piper, but let's take a look at the grapes that they are permitted by law to grow in Champagne. They can't just grow anything. And yet another reason why this region is unique, whereas a lot of places around the world, you know, they can plant whatever grape varieties they want, and they can make it sparkling if they wish in whatever fashion they want. Well, not here. It's highly regulated. Pinot Noir, one of the most highly planted variety here at 38%. And if you kind of want some of the best Pinot Noir, a lot of the Grand Cru villages for Pinot, really well known in the Montagne de Reims, if you want to kind of seek that out. situated. It's a plateau right between Reims and Epernay, just very well known for the variety. And Pinot, as it contributes to the wine, kind of this, a lot of red fruits, as I mentioned, a lot of floral notes like roses and violets. And it once was explained to me that it was kind of the filling, if you will. You know, if you think about either like a donut or something like that, this gives it body. This gives it a plushness, a richness to the wine. Whereas I think a little, when we get to the Chardonnay, we'll explain that a little bit more, but this is the filling. This gives it a lot of body and a lot of power,
which you may not immediately think you want or need in a champagne. It's a white sparkling wine. It's supposed to be light and bubbly, but when you're missing it, you know you're missing it. You really want your wine to be balanced, so you do need that filling in there for sure.
Yeah. And as I said, many wines do blend with these three varieties. There's some special ones that are singles, which we'll talk about in a second too. So let's go on to our next grape. And, you know, real quick, Jenna, why don't you explain? So Pinot Noir, you might be looking at this and you're like, okay, well, Pinot Noir, this is a black grape variety. And we see that on camera, and you guys have tasted Pinot Noir plenty, but yet here it is, half of this blend is Pinot Noir. So what is going on?
They are removing the skins from the grapes. So skins and red grapes and black grapes, that's what gives it its color. They're usually, when they're fermenting wine, they're leaving the skins in the wine and with those grapes. And they're usually about, for a still wine, 2 weeks or so, give or take. And that's going to give it tannin, structure, and the color, the deep color that we always see. We do sell several actually white Pinot Noirs in the store, just still wines. And it's just the same process. They just remove those skins right away.
Yep. So they're basically processing this almost as if it's a white wine, that they're pressing the juice out of these berries off of the skins and then going through fermentation. So they're not extracting any of that color. So hence, and you see that in that photo, by the way, in the middle, you see the pulp of the berry itself is always going to be that kind of translucent, kind of lemony color, regardless of the color of the skin. So,
which some people you're probably familiar with table grapes is kind of a similar,
you
bite into a red grape that you'd get from the grocery store, it's not going to be red in color up underneath the skin. So same idea.
Okay, so another grape variety that is popular is Meunier. Pinot Meunier, you may have heard. And this is a very vigorous variety. So growers really like it because it is a little bit easier to grow. Remember, Pinot Noir is very finicky, difficult to do well, but Meunier is a little more forgiving. And it also adds kind of roundness. I think it adds a lot of floral aromas that not on this slide, but I really always get a lot of violets and flowers with Meunier. It also tends to be accessible in its youth. And so some wines that are kind of meant to really be consumed quite quickly also might have a good amount of Meunier in them because they're super pretty. A lot of kind of yellow apples, a lot of pear qualities as well coming from the Meunier. We have a great flavor chart we're going to show you here at the end, but another great variety to know. And lastly, of course, Chardonnay. And you know, we talked about how great Pinot Noir was and is, and I do love it. But Chardonnay and Champagne is my love language. If you want to win me over, just bring me a Blanc de Blanc Champagne, and I'll be happy for days. And so it is just under a third of the plantings here. And here we find more citrus, more stone fruit aromas. And I think really Chardonnay shows off what we call these autolytic qualities, kind of some of the bready, yeasty, biscuity notes that we get in because of winemaking. Because of that second fermentation in bottle and time on lees. We'll talk about that in a second. Chardonnay, I think, really exemplifies those and allows those to shine. But everyone has their preference. I know plenty of people in wine and out that prefer Pinot Noir kind of driven wines or Chardonnay. So next time you're at the store, I would encourage you to ask for a Pinot driven champagne and a Chardonnay driven champagne and compare those. And if you want to get kind of specific there, you can ask if you want for a Blanc de Noir, so a white of black, so a white wine of all black grape varieties. So that'll be 100% Pinot Noir, or a combination of Pinot Noir and Meunier, or even 100% Meunier, but all black grape varieties in that wine. Blanc de Blanc, white of whites, will in practice be 100% all Chardonnay. Okay, they are allowed to grow a few other varieties, 4 others actually, but very, very small percentage of the makeup. So let's do our next wine, and then we will come back to winemaking.
Yeah.
Sound good? All right. So next up, what do we have?
Taittinger. There.
Okay, so a very, very well-known house that you all might know. This is Taittinger. We have this on sale right now, and really one of our favorites, especially this time of year. It comes in a beautiful gift box too. So I see, so sorry, just looking through the questions in chat here, someone joining, loving Blanc de Blanc as well. Thank you. Yay. Good shout out. And a good question here that we'll address, because you'll see we're drinking out of these tulip shaped glasses, and this is kind of the, I don't want to say the official glass, but definitely one that is said to be the best or most optimal way to enjoy champagne. Why this is better than a flute? Because that's very common, okay? And it's not that you can't enjoy it out of a flute, please do. But why this is a little bit better? A flute is very narrow throughout the glass and at the top. When you have such a narrow aperture, it's very hard to kind of get in there with your nose and appreciate all of the aromas. Whereas, because of how the glass widens here midway through and then starts to narrow, the aromas are able to gather and then kind of funnel up to your nose, but you still have kind of a decent size here at the top to appreciate those and smell those. So making this kind of one of the best glasses.
And smelling wine it looks snobby, you might feel snobby, but it's so important to tasting. I mean, what's one of the first things people say when you have a plate of food presented to you? You either say, this looks amazing, or this smells amazing. That's one of the first things you do
very true.
When tasting anything. So it is really important with wine as well for the full experience. So snob away, everyone.
Yes, but the one kind of, snobby wine thing we don't need to do with our champagne is swirled around too much, because you will start to lose those bubbles if you do that. So you can just kind of really let it sit, and the aromas will jump out, no doubt. And you'll see the bubbles will kind of just continue to come up through the glass. So yes, that is your kind of tulip shaped glass. Now I will say, I live in Chicago. You're just outside, you're in Chicago, right? Just outside Chicago.
Yeah, just right outside.
If space is an issue and you're like, okay, well, that's all well and good, but I can't have, 8 different types of glassware in my home. You're fine, use a white wine glass, okay? And at the end of the day, we do, as I mentioned at the beginning, champagne is not just for celebrations, it's for your Tuesday night as well. So you have it when whatever will make you happy.
Yes.
All right.
And I do want to address one other question really quickly that I believe Steph asked, if you can preserve a bottle of champagne after you've opened it, like you can with regular wine. And you can. It won't last quite as long, unfortunately, as a still wine. But you can get one, it's going to look like this. And we sell them at Binny's. You can get them at Target, I'm sure. But this rubber part here in the middle, if you can see that, is going to go inside. And then you just are going to push down and then just push the 2 little flappies. Those are going to hook underneath the lip of that bottle there, so that pressure will not shoot it off. That's why you don't want to put a cork in there. The pressure inside the bottle is going to shoot that cork right out. So that's why you're going to want one of these. But you stick it in the fridge and it'll be good for another day or so. Yeah, definitely. But like I said, unfortunately, not quite as long as a still wine. But
yeah, you will just start to lose some of the bubbles and the freshness if you wait kind of that 4 days or so that you might be used to keeping a normal white wine in your fridge. But Barbara, one of our wine buyers, and has been with us for 40 years. She loves champagne, and she will go home and have a glass, and she'll say this all the time. And she just puts puts the closure on, revisits the next day. So do feel free to do that. And Jeff making a little joke here that people preserve champagne overnight. I'm going to assume that means that you have no problem finishing the bottle that night. Very good. I love it. Love your style. All right, let's continue on. Let's talk about winemaking. Oh yes, oh wait, Chattenger. I do want to talk Chattenger real quick. Sorry, we got ahead of ourselves. So here we are. This is their Brut La Française, and they have a full line as well. They do non-vintage like this. They do demi-sec. They do vintage champagne as well. So just from a single year rather than blending for multiple years. But this wine is 40% Chardonnay. So now we see Chardonnay take the lead, 35% Pinot Noir, and 25% Meunier. And here they're blending from 35 different villages. And another special attribute about the Champagne region is that most producers, when we're saying that they're blending from 35 villages, they're getting this fruit, whether it's their own vineyards or they're sourcing it and working with a grower that they've probably worked with for years. They are going to ferment and keep those wines separate and then go through and blend those wines. We're going to explain that now in the winemaking process. But I know, Roederer, for example, famous for blending from 100 plus different vessels, okay, that they're tasting and bringing together for their wines. So it's a talent that is quite exceptional, it's called the chef de cave that they handle. So let's get into that. Sorry, real quick, what do you think on the Challenger?
I love it. Always love it. It's Challenger is another great go-to. Little bit more body than the Piper though. So you're looking at something a little bit drier as well. Yeah, it does have that
noticeably drier
in, that'll kind of stick to your teeth a little bit after you've taken a sip. So definitely someone who wants a drier champagne, but maybe someone who's a little more experienced in champagne or knows what to expect from a bottle of champagne like this.
And I will agree with the comment that just came in. It's toastier. Completely agree. And I mentioned how Chardonnay tends to let those autolytic notes come through, and that toasty. It's kind of like there's a pastry biscuity quality to the wine, and I say that in the most pleasant, way. It adds great complexity to the wine, and so a marked difference, I think, from that more just kind of orchard fruit driven Piper that's round and has that touch of kind of that with the dosage, just that touch of sweetness to it. That you can pick up here. We're drier. We have that noticeably kind of, I think the acids picked up, and that toasty element, in addition to a lot of kind of citrus and stone fruits that the Chardonnay is bringing to the wine. So there you have it. We'll kind of show prices here at the end just to remind you all of the wines. So let's continue. We kind of referenced a lot of this already, but I do want to show this visual because it is really helpful. So up in the top left of your screen, we see grapes of both colors. Okay, so black grape varieties and white grape varieties. And we'll go ahead and press those grapes that are all hand-picked, as I mentioned, all those bunches. We'll press the juice off the skins because we don't need any of that color or that tannin from the skin. We'll let that settle and we'll go through our first fermentation. Many do this in stainless steel, but many are also famous for doing actually some barrel fermentation here early on. And they kind of looking for a more oxidative, kind of nutty style, Bollinger coming to mind. That oxidative style, also something that Krug does as well. But after that first fermentation, now we just have a bunch of still kind of regular, if you want to call it, wines. And that's when this blending that I mentioned of different wines of different years, wines of different vineyards, wines of different grape varieties will all be considered. All right. And well, I'll let you kind of take it from there after the blending.
Yeah. And I do want to say the point, because I don't think we touched on this earlier when we talked about the blending, but the point of doing multiple vintages, multiple varieties, is that these are kind of their entry level, if you will, to these houses for the most part. And they are trying to create a consistent flavor profile. No matter if you buy a bottle today, if you buy it 5 years from now, you know what to expect from this bottle. And that's what's going to keep you coming back.
Yes.
Versus something like a vintage champagne. So that's why they're doing it that way. So just wanted to touch on that really quick.
And sorry, can I just add,
yeah.
you know, with the non-vintage, as Jenna so perfectly said, it's for house style. It's so you know what to expect, and it's really representation of kind of their style and what they're kind of proud of and what they make. But you know, never think that it's kind of inferior to even to a vintage, because vintage is just an expression of a single year. It has a little more personality to it because it's unique, and you will pay a little bit more for that typically. However, that doesn't necessarily kind of make it better. Like, yes, longer aging requirements, but all of that to say, if you find a non-vintage champagne that you love, you know, go for it, because it's a style that they're going after, and they're achieving that through blending. So yeah, just wanted to add that, just kind of a different approach.
Yeah. So yeah, after the blending, we go into the disgorgement. So when you're after you've done your blending, in these bottles of wine, there's going to be like sediment, a lot of just funky stuff, if you will, in this bottle of wine. And so they rest the bottles, as you can see in the picture, upside down, and that's going to settle all of that sediment into the neck of the bottle, and just get all in place together. And then what they do is essentially they just freeze that. They freeze the neck of the bottle, and that sediment gets a nice little cube, if you will. And then they're just essentially going to shoot that right out. And so then you are left without any of that sediment in the bottle, and not in your champagne, obviously. Now, you do lose a little bit of wine when doing so. And so from there, you're going to go into the dosage, which will be adding back in the wine that we lost, as well as adding in sugar if they are trying to make a sweeter and extra dry style, a sec style, demi-sec style, or if they want it as dry as possible, they may not add any sugar at all, and just keep it as is, but they will add more of juice, more wine to there to fill it up. And then, you know, from there you have your corking and your wiring. So that cage that you have over your cork in the bottle is extremely important to our safety. It's going to keep that cork in place. There's a lot of pressure in a bottle of champagne, and any sparkling wine, there's a lot of pressure in there. And that cork can fly out. I'm sure we've seen a million videos on YouTube of people opening a bottle of champagne and it flying off. And someone could get really hurt by that, as funny as they are. And so that cage is going to keep us all safe from there. And then you have your packaging, your foil, and everything that makes it pretty and marketable to us.
So yeah, so real quick, just a couple other points. Firstly, you always want to keep that cage on when you're opening your bottle of champagne. You always think, oh, I'm going to untwist it and then remove the cage. Well, you're actually then allowing, if there's a lot of pressure, to push that cork out, and that's the dangerous part. So leave that cage on, keep your hand on it at all times. I just wanted to touch on a couple points that we kind of moved through quickly after the blending. You know, we do need to now have our still wine we've gone through one fermentation to create this wine. We're going to then want to go through a second fermentation. And this is really key. Second fermentation, and it's in bottle, as I mentioned, in the very bottle that you buy the wine in that bottle, they put they put the blended still wine in, okay, the Von Clair. They'll add that in with more sugar and more yeast to kickstart another fermentation. And you'll see in the photo that the bottles are stored at what's called surlacq on their side to maximize contact between the wine and all of those yeast cells. So whenever we kind of talk about those bready, biscuity, toasty notes in champagne, it's from time on those yeast cells, okay, and lees, L-E-E-S, which you see. And their aging requirements, you know, that come with that. All right, all non-vintage champagne must have total aging of a minimum of 15 months. Now, many surpass that. That Taittinger, they're aging Taittinger for about 3 to 4 years for non-vintage. All right, minimum for vintage wine is 3 years. All right, many far exceed that. So after that time on lees, after the second fermentation, then we'll go into that riddling to gather all that sediment and those kind of dead yeast cells, frankly, at the neck of the bottle. And you'll see that in the photo, and then disgorgement as Jenna went through.
Yes, that I skipped many steps because I read the graph wrong.
You do have to kind of snake down. It's not super intuitive. But all right. Now, one wine that we're going to end with today, which is a real delight, is the Laurent Perrier Cuvée Rosé, and we'll taste it in a moment, but I do just want to give a shout out because a lot of champagne rosé is made via blending. This was something that was invented by Madame Clicquot, and you'll see it's kind of the same chart that you just saw, but in that blending stage on the right hand side in the middle, you'll see they'll add in a little bit of red wine to give it that color. Okay, pretty straightforward. It's really not permitted much elsewhere in Europe, this way of making sparkling rosé. But what Laurent Perrier does is maceration. And there are a few champagne producers that do this, but it's most certainly rare. And they will go ahead and macerate just like if you would a traditional still rosé. They'll let that kind of juice macerate on the skins for, they do about 2 to 3 days, okay, about 48 to 72 hours, just to pick up a little bit of that color. And so it is a more kind of labor intensive process, and they're really proud of that. But Laurent Perrier Cuvée Rosé, they're doing the macerated process of making rosé, whereas many do blending, which both are great, but just knowing that they're out there is helpful. Okay. So let's go ahead. This just states what I already shared with you about these minimum aging requirements that champagne has. And I always like to kind of ask a tough question, well, more of like a trick question in a lot of our classes. And when I introduce champagne to a lot of our staff that are, new to us, and I say, well, what do we think the minimum aging requirements are in the United States, for example, right? Well, there are none. And so don't think that every sparkling wine of the world, is aged in the same way, because aging requirements vary. They vary across Europe, they vary across the world. But it's one thing that does make champagne so complex and so age-worthy as well, and so kind of sophisticated in its flavor profile due to that time on lees that we mentioned. All right, just getting kind of caught up on some of the comments here. We're gonna move to our next champagne, which is our Charton Taillé. This is their Saint Anne. Now this is a grower. The last two we had were houses. And Jenna, how, if a customer comes in and says, oh, I want a grower champagne, and while we of course know most all the producers on our shelves and kind of take you from there, but if you didn't know, you had a brand new wine, or maybe hopefully this doesn't happen to you, but maybe you're in the store and everyone's busy and you're on your own, how do you know that this is a grower champagne?
Well, hopefully your local Binny's wine department has labeled these for you on the shelf. But if they have not, the easiest way to tell is on the label. Sometimes it's on the front. It might be on the side here or on the bottom. Oh, I'm sorry, on the side or on the bottom. It's going to be very small. In this case, it is on the back right down here. And you're going to see a number, and it's going to start with RM. And then it'll follow with a bunch of random numbers. That RM is going to denote that this is a grower champagne. And I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of what the RM stands for. If you want to go ahead and take that one for
I'll
me.
take it, yeah. So it stands for Récoltant Manipulant.
Yep, would have butchered that.
All right, and so this is your indication that it is a grower. If it's a house, it'll have NM, Négociant Manipulant. Oui, Jeff, merci. Jeff's typing it out for us in the chat. If anyone has inquired about the spelling. So this is your sign that it is a grower. And as was kind of joked within the chat as well, you will need really a good eyesight. Yes. So bring your glasses because it's in a very, very small font. But anyway, we'll help you out with that in the store. But again, here we are with our Charton Taillé. Most of this is from the Montagne de Reims kind of subregion, if you will, growing area of Champagne. And most of the wine from the 2018 vintage, they're blending in some other years too, but the majority of it is that. The wine is 40% Chardonnay, 40% Pinot Noir, and the remainder is Meunier.
And I will point out
Yes.
for our nerds out there that this particular bottle does have all of these nice tech facts for you right on the back label. Not all, not even a lot will, but always look out. A lot of producers will do that for you. And it's always nice to kind of be able to find that without Googling it.
Yes, and too, you know, a lot of them will tell you the disgorgement date on the back. And so you'll remember that process. When did they disgorge? When did they take it off lees and change out that beer cap, remove the sediment and put a real cork in there. So this one for me is, I think just like there's like a coffee bean, like nutty quality that's coming through on the champagne. It's not kind of, the fruit isn't kind of as much. There's like a lemon curd, nectarine thing, some brambly red fruits, but there's, yeah, this like nutty coffee element that comes through on the wine.
And like mouth-watering acidity. I mean, the other two had very nice acidity as well, but this one, like my mouth is watering after that, little racy. It's very nice, very pleasant.
Yes, leaner style, I would say, no doubt. And if you like that type of style, lacy acidity, and not as round and rich, you know, you can look for a label that says Brut Nature or Brut Zero. That means, as Jenna mentioned earlier, that they have not added any sugar in the dosage stage. You also could look for Extra Brut. Technically 0 to 6 grams per liter allowed there. It is still a very, very dry style. Because Brut, now we can get all the way up to 12. There's quite a range there, up to 12 grams per liter of sugar. So, but if you like the leaner styles, this is a great one from Charton Taillé, Saint Anne. This is on the shelf, $49.99. So again, a really great price, especially for grower champagne, which does tend to be a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, this is delicious.
Real quick, just a comment on what I see. A co-op that was mentioned, Nicolas Foyet. Nicolas Foyet, one of the most famous co-ops. They may even be one of the biggest. I don't want to say that for sure, but they're definitely up there. Yeah, that blue label, definitely out there. We have another one called Michel Maillard on our shelves if you're interested in a co-op. A slightly different version of a co-op on that one, but still one nonetheless. Almost done here, folks, and we're going to do our trivia here in just a moment. I want to just leave us with this last page of the aromas, and you can see again how age-worthy champagne is, and how these grape varieties that we've talked about as we've tasted these wines, how they develop over time. You know, we from kind of Chardonnay through down to Pinot Noir, over time we get that more of the brioche, more of the nutty, the caramel, the honeyed, the kind of dried fruit, coffee beans, bread qualities. So you can open champagne when you get it, but of course you can continue to age it if you'd like, but know that the producer has done a lot of that aging for you as well, and some even hold back and release at a later time, so you can enjoy that. All right, and a comment here, the wine smells like toasted marshmallows. Yep, I can totally see that. That's a great note, definitely. All right, folks, while we pour our Laurent Perrier Cuvée Rosé, which I love, and I'll share our final, oh, there we go. Here are the wines that we had tonight. We're now going to start the trivia. So as I mentioned, you want to make sure that you are watching us on Zoom right now, and that you launch the application, that you're not in the web browser version. And we will start the trivia. How this is going to work is that when you entered and gave your name and email, we'll pull that and we'll see all of the poll data after. We'll find the best 3 scores. We'll email everyone so you know that we have not forgotten about you. But the top 3 scores will all get a gift certificate to Binny's, and we'll make that available at a store of your choosing, okay, at your local store. And we certainly hope that it goes to some champagne consumption in the near future. All right. And I totally agree, Betty. Always better in a Magnum. I would challenge, I think it was Jeff earlier that didn't store any wine overnight to see how that Magnum goes. But all right here, well, we're gonna have this glass of the rosé, and I will launch this poll. So just give it a sec, it'll pull up on your screen. There are a lot of questions that we covered tonight, but then there are some that we did not. And please play fairly and don't do any Googling on your phone, that ruins the fun. And we'll let you have a look. And in the meantime, I will pour some wine.
Beautiful nose.
Yeah, so the Laurent Perrier, we'll just kind of keep chatting here while you go ahead and answer these questions. But 100% Pinot here.
Yes.
So they are doing that kind of maceration, but all Pinot Noir. All right, we'll give you all just a couple more minutes. We see a lot of answers coming through here. And as you'll see, some kind of fun questions that probably even the biggest champagne enthusiast might just not know off the top of their head. So we tried to keep it educational, but a little fun too.
Can't make it too easy on you guys.
Yes. So we'll just let this go another 2 minutes or so. If you are done, again, please pour yourself a glass and enjoy. We'll give everyone else a second to submit their answers. All right, we're almost done here. We'll give it 1 more minute, just a couple people left. And perhaps everyone can see in the chat. Did anyone see Marilyn pour all those bottles into the tub? Very, very funny. And, you know, Jeff, I thought maybe after this quiz that you would prefer the Melchizedek champagne bottle of all. And we'll reveal that answer here in a second. Okay, we are going to end the poll here. So thank you all for your submissions. There we have it. And so we'll kind of, you know, just briefly go through the answers just so you have a sense of how you did here. And, you know, we talked about this, the blending of a non-vintage champagne, all of the above. All right, they can combine different years. And they initially did this, and they hold back these reserved wines because it is a very cool climate. Temperatures are rising a little bit, but initially, they could have really bad years that they couldn't produce wine. So they wanted to make sure they have some in reserve. So yes, different vintages, different vineyards, and different grape varieties. And most all of you got that. Now, the largest bottle of champagne is called the Melchizedek. Jenna, how many bottles?
That's going to be 40 bottles inside one bottle.
Yes, 40 regular 750s there in the Melchizedek.
Going to need a lot of friends for that one.
Yes, yeah. So a holiday one, certainly, or over several nights. And we did have a few people get that. So awesome. Minimum aging period for non-vintage. This is 15 months. Okay, so total aging is the minimum of 15 months for non-vintage. As I mentioned, many far exceed this. Within that 15 months, just to tell you, that time on lees, that time where it's stored on its side after the second fermentation in the bottle, that's going to be 9 months. Has to be the lees contact for at least 9 months for non-vintage. All right, but 15 months total there for the minimum non-vintage. All right, and then this one, Jenna, you told us, but you can remind us of the answer.
Yes, for the let me read the question first. Oh yes,
so
grower champagne
yep.
would be the RM.
The RM, yes, and most got that. Now, so this process used to be done by hand, and it would take weeks to do. And now they use what's called a gyro pellet to help, and it's a machine that does this. But still, some do it by hand. I want to say I think Paul Roger still does it by hand. I don't, I guess you're keeping someone employed. It doesn't necessarily going to make it any better. But the process here, where you're slowly turning the bottle by a fraction of a degree and eventually upright. So as Jenna described, all those yeast cells gather in the neck of the bottle for you to freeze and disgorge. That is called riddling. All right. And to the comment, yes, love Paul Roger. I was thinking about putting on here a quote from Winston Churchill about, that it's, I'm going to butcher it, but it's, gentlemen, it's not just France we're fighting for, it's champagne. And Paul Roger, of course, being his favorite champagne. The official region, the official appellation, Jenna, what year was that established?
In 1936.
1936. So boundaries kind of set initially some years before, but 1936 would be when it officially went into law as an official appellation. Okay? And then most all of you got the vintage champagne, minimum of 36 months, so minimum 3 years of aging here, many much longer. But this really, really develops the sophistication and concentration of vintage champagne. Okay, a little bit of a random question here. The Marilyn Monroe famously took a bath in champagne, and it took 350 bottles. So just a couple of you got that one right. Well done. And a couple more here. Champagne is made by using what process? Well, Jenna, what is this?
It is the traditional method.
Yeah, so you'll call it kind of method champenoise. Sometime you might see that.
Which is what I was about to say, and I was like, that's not an option, so they're not going to know what I'm talking
about. But the traditional method is kind of probably most used in conversation, and has what inspired, and it's a process that has inspired so many around the world to use the same method of production. With that said, though, could be different grape varieties, obviously be different climate, different soils, different people, different aging requirements, and so forth. And then lastly, we asked you what grape variety is not permitted, and most all of you got this correct, which was Sauvignon Blanc. All right, so we said Chardonnay, Meunier, Pinot Noir, the three most common of the 7 varieties permitted in the region, but yes, no Sauvignon Blanc allowed in Champagne.
And that's not to say you can't make sparkling wine with Sauvignon Blanc. We do have them, just not in Champagne.
Yes, exactly. So I will stop sharing the wonderful wines that we had today, which I do encourage you to go out and buy. But thank you all so much for joining us on
thank you. It
Champagne
was
Day,
lovely.
as we took
Yes.
part in this global celebration of the premier sparkling wine region of the world. And we hope that you enjoyed it. Thanks for playing along. We'll be emailing y'all tomorrow. And any questions, you can email us at wine@bennys.com. My name is Alicia.
I'm Jenna.
Thanks so much.
Thank
and
you.
Cheers to you all.
Everyone.